Hi folks, how are you doing? Today we're gonna see another game of Paul Morphy. I'm gonna try to explain it as best as we can for beginners. In this game we're gonna see Morphy playing with black pieces for the first time, and his opponent is going to be the same as the same player as in the previous part as in the previous video. So go ahead and check that video if you haven't seen that. White pieces are being played by Alexander Beaufort Meek, Meek. So this game was played in mobile 1855, and Paul Morphy was black here. He played e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, very normal and natural moves. White attacks the pawn on e5, black defends it with the knight, and here d4. This is called the Scotch opening. Relatively common move and very logical. White is striking in the center right away, trying to get an advantage in the center right away, just from the opening. Just to take a look very quickly, which are the other most common played moves here. Bishop c5, putting the bishop on this square we have already seen in other openings, like in the King's Gambit. This is very aggressive and very good place for the bishop, usually just targeting the f7 weak pawn, and white is ready to castle. The other very normal move is to play bishop b5 with a fairly simple idea. Just white is attacking the c5 pawn, the knight on c6 is defending, so we go ahead and attack that knight with the bishop on b5. Of course, it is not that easy to take this pawn and win a pin, and in fact this is one of the most deep and strategically rich openings in chess. This is called the Spanish opening, or the Ruy Lopez. And of course it is also possible just to develop the other knight, playing knight c3. But okay, here Morphy's opponent goes ahead to play d4, the Scotch opening, very direct approach, trying to tag this e5 pawn with the pawn on d4. Now black takes, usually, well, in this case there is almost no other move, just taking here. And here white plays bishop c4. So far leaving that pawn on d4, not taking it right away, and just developing a piece on a very aggressive square, aiming this f7 pawn. Let's take a look very quickly which are the main moves. So taking on d4 is very principal. Now there are a couple of moves here black could play. Knight f6 is one of them, leading lots of complicated lines where white, after exchanging on 6, white advances, and queen e7, etc. But not going enter there so far. But bishop c5 is another idea, just attacking this knight on d4. But okay, that did not happen because bishop c4 was played right away. Now bishop c5, developing a piece and protecting for the time being this pawn. Also, well, as we will see, white is not going to stick to his pawn forever. He's just developing pieces. Now knight g5, a very simple threat, a direct attack on this f7 pawn. And black certainly has a way to avoid it. He plays knight to h6, protecting f7. And here, well, it would be really logical for white to just castle. Black would castle as well, and white could even think of sacrificing the pawn, some kind of c3, and if takes, yet develop another piece. And once again we see white is trying to have compensation for a sacrificed pawn. Black is up a pawn, but white is trying to develop more pieces in exchange of that pawn and control the center with this pawn on e4. Instead of this, after knight h6, white took on f7. Now this is sacrificing a piece for the time being, but as we will see, white is going to take it back, although it doesn't seem that great to go after this combination. Now knight takes, bishop takes, king takes, and the point is that queen h5 is checked to the king and is attacking at the same time the bishop on c5. Now g6, and the queen takes. Now the material equality is back, but the point is that black king will not be able to castle anymore. His king is a little bit weak here, as has had to move to f7, and well, could be somehow vulnerable to attacks. But on the other hand, white hasn't developed any piece other than the queen. And as we saw in previous videos, more in general, it is not that great to develop the queen very early in the game, as it could be harassed, chased by enemies' pawns and enemies' light pieces. And well, the opponent will take these tempos to develop and get some advantage. So this is, well, a very interesting position. Black has a weak king, and white doesn't have that many pieces developed to attack that king. Now d6 is very logical, just taking control of the c5 square, attacking the queen, of course, and giving some space to this bishop on c8 to be developed. Queen b5 is, well, getting away from the attack, having an eye into this b7 pawn, because it seems now the bishop cannot be developed that easily, because the b7 pawn would be hanging. So black plays rook e8, just putting the rook in a very good open file, is attacking the pawn on e4, and indirectly X-raying the white king on the center. Here, once again, completing the development would be advisable for white, castling, even though black would take that pawn. Now he's up a pawn, but white could definitely try to take advantage of the bizarre placement of the rook here, and well, he has sacrificed a pawn and who has to look for the compensation. Now queen d5 check is attacking both the king and the rook. The rook must go back not to be lost, and white should go and looks out for some compensation. And I think white is not that bad here, because now he's attacking the queen will have to move, and although he's down a pawn, the black king is weak, is not that well placed, and black's pieces are not going to be that well coordinated. There is not going to be much development for black, and white will put probably his knight on d2, connect the rooks, go ahead to attack the king, which is vulnerable here on f7. But instead, here after rook e8, white went with this queen b3 check, which in fact doesn't seem that great. Now d5 is at the same time defending his own king, because it's protected with the queen. The queen cannot take that pawn, and at the same time it's attacking the white king, because it is still in the center and this pawn is pinned. It cannot move. So as it's here pinned, attacking it with d5 makes a lot of sense. White played f3 here, just defending this pawn seems a good idea. But once again, let us take a look. Well, it's not. This diagonal could be potentially very important for black, as it is weakening white king's position. Now black played here knight a5, attacking the queen on b3. Something like even something like bishop e6, dropping a pawn on b7 would be interesting, because once again we're going to see one of the players sacrificing a pawn and developing pieces, taking advantage of the tempos that the opponent is going to lose taking the pawn. Now queen takes b7, the knight on c6 is attacked, queen d6, and now the queen defends on c6, the rooks are connected. And although he's down a pawn, all his pieces are almost developed, the rooks are connected, are ready to attack the white king with this kind of moves. And the only thing white has is a pawn and only this queen on b7, not looking really that great. But the rest of his pieces are on the starting positions, and something which could be also important, the king is still in the center. But anyway, knight a5 looks great as well. Now queen d3, black took, and now we will see that this diagonal is going to be important for black, and the king, as the king is still in the center, white has had plenty of time to castle, but he hasn't, and he's going to be punished for that. Queen h4 check. Now you might say, well, we got g3, there are no tricks of taking on g3 and taking the rook on h1 as in previous games, right? But black has the rook on e8, he takes on e4 with check, now it's protected. King f2, and now the queen goes back to e7, protecting the rook and controlling this e file. Knight d2, just attacking the rook on e4, but rook e3 is attacking the queen, and the queen must be careful because this e2 square is very important. If black gets in there with some checks, his king is very weak right now and could be easily checkmated. Now here white is attacking, it seems he's attacking the knight on a5, but black plays a very strong move, c6. Now white is welcomed to take the knight on e5, as if he does so, white king is going to be checkmated in a couple of moves. Not really advisable to do these kind of things, where to take material when your king is very, very weak and the opponent has enough pieces to checkmating. So white cannot take on e5, so he must keep control of this important e2 square. So he goes queen f1, controlling this square. Once again, a very interesting move, bishop h3, trying to deviate white queen from defending this e2 square. White did not take. Had he taken, a couple of checks would have followed. Now if the white king goes down, it would be much easier for black to checkmate him, much faster. But even if he goes up to f3, he is going to find himself in lots of trouble. Now here h5 check. If black does not want to be checkmated very fast in just one move, queen e7 checkmate, he's going to have to sacrifice his queen, but it's not going to be enough to save himself from checkmating. So here queen h8, and a couple of moves later white will be checkmated, and if he goes to h4, now queen e7 takes, and queen f6, important move. Now white is threatening to get in with queen g6, queen f5, the other rook is going to go to the h file, and white will be checkmated really, really fast. So bishop h3, a deviating move, which white wisely refuses. Queen d1, still protecting this important e2 square. But anyway, black has mobilized lots of pieces here, and white is in fact in a very, very, very big danger. Rook f8, bringing this rook into the open file and just threatening to check. White just keep getting out with the king, discovered check. Knight f3, trying to defend a little, but after king e8, black has just too many pieces here. Both rooks, the queen here, the pawn also is important, defending the rook, the bishop controlling these light squares, and white had enough of this and resigned. Now only 21 moves. And once again we see Paul Morphy winning, because he's developing pieces very quickly and he's taking advantage of the weakening moves of the opponent and taking the opponent's king in the center, trapping it, and not letting it go. So this was also for today. Hope to see you in next videos, and thanks for watching.